here's a peculiar thing about chaos. It doesn't knock before it enters. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't introduce itself politely. It simply arrives. And suddenly, you're in the middle of something you don't understand, something you didn't plan for, something that threatens to pull you under. Chaos is like that. It moves swiftly. It dismantles the structures you built so carefully, the ones that gave you certainty, stability, and direction. And when that happens, when life suddenly feels incomprehensible, what do? Most people panic. They resist, they deny, they flail around trying to put the pieces back together as quickly as possible. But here's the issue. When you try to piece together something that has already been shattered, you fail to realize that the form it once took no longer exists. It is no longer what it was, and neither are you. So now you have a choice. You can either mourn the loss of control, or you can find a way to focus on what you can control. That's the challenge. And it's a challenge that will determine whether you emerge from chaos stronger or weaker than before. And that's where clarity comes in. See, chaos will test you, but clarity will free you. That means you don't defeat chaos by meeting it with more chaos. You don't navigate through uncertainty by becoming more uncertain. You do it by pulling yourself together, by refusing to become fragmented just because the world around you is fragmented. And how do you do that? You do it by understanding something fundamental. Your mind is the battleground. You think the battle is happening outside of you, but it's not. It's happening inside your own head. If you believe the chaos is stronger than you, it is. If you believe you have no control, you don't. If you allow your emotions to be dictated by the instability of the world around you, then you've surrendered your power before you've even begun to fight. So let's get this straight. You don't fight chaos with chaos. You fight it with order. You fight it with clarity. You fight it by taking radical responsibility for what is within your grasp. And let's be clear, responsibility isn't comfortable. It's not easy. Responsibility demands that you wake up every single day and decide, despite everything, that you will be the kind of person who maintains their composure even when life is falling apart. It means that you discipline your mind so that it does not become overwhelmed by fear, by doubt, by resentment. It means that you stop wishing for the world to change and start changing yourself instead. Now, this is where people get stuck. They think, well, that's not fair. Why should I have to be the one to change? Why should I have to be the one to stay strong? Why should I have to take responsibility for something I didn't cause? And that's a dangerous way to think, because resentment is seductive. It whispers in your ear that you are the victim, that you are powerless, that you should wait for someone else to fix things for you. And that's exactly how you lose control over your own life. The truth is, no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you clarity on a silver platter. No one is going to come into your life and sort out the mess for you. That is your job. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can reclaim control over yourself, even if you can't control anything else. So, where do you start? You start by breaking the problem down into something manageable. People get overwhelmed because they try to fix everything at once. They stare at the wreckage and think, I have no idea where to begin. That's paralysis. That's what happens when you let the enormity of the situation dictate your ability to act. Instead, you need to find one thing, just one small thing that you can do right now, something tangible, something specific. Maybe it's getting out of bed at the same time every morning. Maybe it's writing down your thoughts so they don't spiral out of control. Maybe it's deciding to take care of your health, even if nothing else is going right. Because here's the secret, small actions lead to bigger transformations. When you take control of one aspect of your life, no matter how minor, you prove to yourself that you are still capable of order. You are still capable of clarity. And that belief, no matter how small at first, begins to reshape the way you see yourself. You are no longer just a person trapped in chaos. You are a person who is actively building a foundation within it. Now, think about what happens when you refuse to do this. Think about what happens when you let chaos dictate your life. You become bitter. You become resentful. You lash out at the world, at others, at yourself. And in doing so, you create even more disorder. You reinforce the very thing that is trying to destroy you. And here's something you need to understand. Chaos is not just external. It's internal. It's in your thoughts and your actions and your words. The moment you allow yourself to become as chaotic as your circumstances, you have lost. But the moment you decide, truly decide, that you will be the anchor in the storm rather than the ship tossed around by it, you take back your power. So what do you choose? Do you choose to let chaos define you, or do you choose to create clarity in the midst of it? That decision, that single decision, is the difference between being someone who is crushed by life and someone who overcomes it. And I'll tell you this, clarity is not a gift, it's a discipline. It's something you cultivate every single day. It's something you fight for when everything inside of you wants to give up. And it starts with a simple but profound realization. You cannot control everything, but you can control yourself. And if you do that, if you truly commit to that, you will find that the chaos outside of you no longer has the power to dictate the strength within you. There are moments in life when everything you've built, everything you've worked for, seems to tremble under forces far beyond your control. You plan, you prepare, you try to secure yourself against uncertainty, and yet, despite your best efforts, chaos still finds a way in. It arrives suddenly, uninvited, sweeping through your world like a storm. And what do most people do? They react, they panic, they scramble to grasp at anything that might restore a sense of control. But here's something important to understand. You cannot control the storm, you cannot dictate the direction of the wind, nor can you demand that the rain stop falling. What you can do, however, is decide how you will stand within it. That choice, that single profound choice, determines everything. When you resist this truth, you suffer. You try to fight reality itself, and that is a battle you will never win. You waste energy worrying about the things that are beyond your reach. You let your mind spiral into anxiety over situations that have already unfolded, over words that have already been spoken, over circumstances that were never in your hands to begin with. And yet you obsess. You replay every detail as if doing so will somehow change what has already happened. But it won't. And in that process, you don't just lose time, you lose yourself. So what do you do instead? You shift your focus. You take a hard, honest look at your situation and you ask yourself, what can I control? What actions, what thoughts, what attitudes are still within my command? Because the moment you recognize where your power lies is the moment you stop being a victim of your circumstances. It's the moment you reclaim something essential, your autonomy. And this is where people hesitate. Because if you accept that you still have control over something, then you also accept responsibility for what happens next. And responsibility is heavy. It means you can no longer blame external factors for your inaction. It means you can no longer wait for someone else to come and rescue you. It means you have to make a decision, and with that decision comes the weight of consequence. But listen, what is the alternative? To stay paralyzed? To let the storm dictate your fate while you stand there helpless, waiting for it to pass? No, that is no way to live. You have a duty to yourself, to those who depend on you, to take ownership of what is still within your grasp. Maybe you cannot change what has already happened, but you can control how you respond to it. Maybe you cannot predict what will come next, but you can prepare yourself to meet it with strength and clarity. And that is what separates those who are broken by adversity from those who rise because of it. But let's be clear, this is not about denial. This is not about pretending that things are fine when they are not. Life is difficult. Suffering is real. There will be times when you are knocked down so hard that getting up feels impossible. And yet, despite that, despite the weight of it all, you must decide, do I let this define me, or do I define myself within it? And that is not an abstract question. It is a practical one. It is a question you answer in the small, mundane moments of every day. Do you wake up and face the day even when you don't want to? Do you take care of your body even when neglect seems easier? Do you speak with integrity even when lies would serve you better in the short term? These choices, small as they seem, are what build resilience. They are what determine whether you remain standing when the storm rages on. People often talk about courage as if it is this grand, dramatic act. But courage is often quiet. It is the moment you choose discipline over despair. It is the moment you decide to keep moving forward, even when there is no immediate reward for doing so. It is the moment you realize that you do not have to feel strong to be strong. Because strength is not a feeling, it is a practice. And so when you find yourself standing in the middle of the storm, remember this. You do not have to control everything. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to predict every outcome. What you have to do is hold yourself together long enough to take the next right step, because that step leads to another, and then another. And before you know it, you are not merely surviving the storm, you are navigating through it. That is what resilience looks like. That is what discipline looks like. That is what control, real control, looks like. Because the truth is, control was never about bending the world to your will. It was always about mastering yourself so that no matter what happens, no matter how the winds change, you remain unshaken. There's something about fear that makes it feel so powerful, so absolute, as though once it takes hold of you, it is impossible to shake. It's a force that creeps in quietly at first, subtle, almost reasonable. It whispers doubts into your ear, plants hesitation in your mind, and before you know it, it has taken control. And the strange thing is, most people don't even realize when it happens. They mistake fear for logic, for prudence, for caution. They tell themselves they're simply being realistic, that they're just trying to avoid failure, that they don't want to make mistakes. But if you look deeper, what you often find is not realism, it is paralysis. It is an unwillingness to move because movement means risk, and risk means uncertainty, and uncertainty means vulnerability. And so they remain stuck, convinced that standing still is safer than stepping forward. But here's the truth. Fear thrives where focus fades. If you allow yourself to be consumed by all the things that could go wrong, by all the ways you might fail, by all the judgments and criticisms of others, you will never move. And if you never move, you never grow. And if you never grow, then what exactly are you protecting? What kind of life is that? A life spent shrinking, avoiding, hesitating? A life where you trade potential for the illusion of safety? Because that's what it is, an illusion. Safety does not come from inaction. It does not come from hiding. It does not come from keeping your head down and hoping the world won't ask too much of you. Safety, real safety, comes from competence. It comes from being strong enough to handle whatever comes next. And you do not become strong by avoiding fear. You become strong by confronting it. But confrontation is painful. It forces you to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge where you are weak, where you lack skill, where you have fallen short. And that is not easy. It is far more comfortable to blame circumstances, to blame other people, to convince yourself that the reason you are stuck is because the world is unfair. And maybe it is. Maybe you were dealt a difficult hand. Maybe life has not been kind to you. But the harsh reality is this: no one is coming to rescue you. No one is going to walk into your life and suddenly make everything better. If you want change, if you want strength, if you want to become someone capable of standing firm in the face of adversity, you are going to have to do the work yourself. And that work begins with focus. Not on what you fear, not on what could go wrong, but on what you can do. You have to learn to discipline your mind so that it does not become a breeding ground for hesitation and doubt. And that is not something that happens naturally. Your brain is wired to protect you from risk, to keep you safe. But safe from what? Safe from failure, safe from discomfort, safe from embarrassment. Those things will not destroy you. What will destroy you is the slow decay that comes from years of inaction, from knowing deep down that you are capable of more but refusing to pursue it. So how do you shift your focus? You start by understanding that fear is not the enemy. Fear is a signal. It is information. It tells you where your weaknesses are, where your insecurities lie, what areas of your life require attention. But it is not a command. It is not something you must obey. Fear will tell you to turn back, to stop, to avoid the challenge ahead. But it is your responsibility to decide whether or not you will listen. And if you do listen, if you allow fear to dictate your choices, then you will live a life shaped by avoidance rather than intention. And that is a tragedy. Because what people do not realize is that the cost of avoiding fear is far greater than the cost of facing it. When you avoid fear, you don't just avoid risk. You avoid opportunity. You avoid growth. You avoid the version of yourself that you could have become. And one day, years from now, you will look back and wonder what might have been if only you had been brave enough to act. So the question is not, how do I eliminate fear? You don't. The question is, how do I move forward despite it? And the answer is simple, though not easy. You act, you take the first step. Even if you are unsure, you focus on the things within your control, you build confidence, you develop discipline, and in doing so, you become someone who is not ruled by fear, but who uses it as fuel. Because here's what happens when you shift your focus. Fear loses its grip. It does not disappear entirely, but it no longer dictates your actions. You begin to see that the more you step into discomfort, the more capable you become. And as you become more capable, the things that once seemed impossible start to feel within reach. That is how transformation happens. Not all at once, but gradually as a result of repeated, deliberate action. And so the choice is yours. Will you allow fear to control your life? Or will you decide here and now that you will no longer be held back by it? Because Because the moment you make that decision, the moment you refuse to let fear dictate your future, you take back something far more powerful than comfort. You take back yourself. There's something profound about responsibility, something that most people misunderstand. They think of it as a burden, as something unfairly placed on their shoulders, as something to be avoided. But responsibility is not a weight that crushes you. It is the very thing that gives your life meaning, because when you take responsibility, real responsibility, not the kind that's forced upon you, but the kind you willingly accept, you stop being at the mercy of everything around you. You stop being a passive participant in your own existence. You step forward willingly and declare that despite the chaos, despite the difficulty, despite the unfairness of life, you will take charge of what is within your grasp. And that changes everything. Because the alternative is weakness, it's passivity, it's the slow erosion of your own agency as you sit back and let the world dictate who you are and what you become. And people do this all the time. They say, it's not my fault, it's my circumstances, it's my past, it's the way I was raised, it's the economy, it's the government, it's them. And maybe they're right. Maybe life has handed them an unfair deal. Maybe the odds really are stacked against them. But here's the brutal truth. What does complaining about that do? What does blaming the world change? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. All it does is keep you stuck. All it does is make you smaller, weaker, more resentful. And resentment, left unchecked, will destroy you. Because resentment is seductive. It tells you that you don't have to change, that you don't have to do the hard thing, that your suffering is someone else's fault, and that because of that, you are absolved of any effort to improve your situation. And people cling to that. They wrap themselves in it like a blanket, comforting themselves with the thought that they are powerless, that they are victims, that they bear no responsibility for where they are. But that is a lie, a dangerous, destructive lie, because the moment you buy into it, you hand over your power. You give up control over your own life. And the tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. They think they're being reasonable. They think they're just acknowledging reality. But what they're really doing is avoiding the one thing that could actually set them free. Ownership, the willingness to stand up and say, no matter what has happened, no matter what has been done to me, no matter how unfair or difficult my situation may be, I will take responsibility for what comes next. Because that is the only way forward. But responsibility is terrifying, because the moment you accept it, you no longer have excuses. You no longer get to hide behind your circumstances. You no longer get to blame the world. You have to face yourself. You have to acknowledge your weaknesses, your failures, your inadequacies. And that is painful. That is deeply, profoundly uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because how else do you grow? How else do you become stronger? And people say, but it's not fair. And they're right. Life is not fair. It never has been, and it never will be. You can spend your whole life waiting for fairness, or you can accept reality as it is and do something about it. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because it means giving up the comforting illusion that one day somehow everything will just fall into place, that someone will come along and fix it, that the right job, the right relationship, the right opportunity will magically appear and solve all your problems. But that's not how life works. If you want something to change, you have to change. And change is difficult. It requires effort. It requires sacrifice. It requires stepping into discomfort over and over again. But the alternative is far worse. The alternative is stagnation. It's looking back years from now filled with regret, knowing that you wasted time waiting for something that was never coming. And that realization is devastating, because by then it's too late. So the question is, what do you do now, right now, in this moment, with whatever you have, no matter how little or how broken it may seem? What do? The answer is simple. You start. You take one step. You take ownership of one thing, no matter how small. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your attitude. Maybe it's how you treat people. Maybe it's how you speak to yourself in your own mind. It doesn't matter where you begin, only that you do. Because once you take that first step, everything changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but over time in ways you cannot yet see. Because responsibility is not just about what you do, it's about who you become. And when you choose to take responsibility, when you choose to own your life instead of being ruled by it, you become someone who is capable of withstanding the chaos, someone who is not easily broken, someone who does not crumble under pressure. And that is what matters. Not comfort, not ease, not fairness, strength, resilience, the ability to stand in the storm and remain unshaken. So if you are waiting for something, stop. If you are hoping that life will suddenly become easier, stop. stop. It won't. But you will become stronger. And that is far more valuable than ease ever could be. Because when you are strong, when you are disciplined, when you take responsibility for yourself fully, no matter what happens, no matter how hard life becomes, you will know you are capable of standing tall and facing it. There is something deeply unsettling about uncertainty. It unsettles people because it reminds them of how little control they truly have. It forces them to confront the fact that no matter how much they plan, no matter how much they prepare, no matter how much they try to build a sense of stability in their lives, they are always at the mercy of forces far beyond their reach. And that terrifies them. Because people crave certainty. They want guarantees. They want to know that if they do everything right, things will work out the way they hope. That if they follow the rules, they will be rewarded. That if they make the right choices, they will be spared from pain and suffering. But that is not how the world works. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can begin to build a mindset that is capable of withstanding whatever comes next. Because here's the truth, uncertainty is not the enemy. It is not something to be feared or avoided. It is a fundamental part of life, and more than that, it is necessary. Without uncertainty, there is no growth. Without uncertainty, there is no challenge. Without uncertainty, there is no opportunity. And yet people spend their entire lives trying to eliminate it. They try to control everything, to predict every outcome, to remove every possible risk before they take action. But that is impossible. And the more you try, the more you trap yourself in a cycle of hesitation, of fear, of paralysis. And that is no way to live. Because what happens when you refuse to step into uncertainty? You shrink, you retreat, you stay in places you have long outgrown because they are familiar. You cling to routines that no longer serve you because they feel safe. You refuse to take risks not because you are incapable, but because you are afraid of what might happen if you fail. And so you stagnate. You trade possibility for predictability. You tell yourself that it is better to stay where you are, even if you are unhappy, than to step into the unknown. But what you do not realize is that by doing so, you are making a choice. You are choosing to live a smaller life. You are choosing to limit yourself. You are choosing to let fear dictate your future. And that is a tragedy. Because uncertainty is not just something to be endured. It is something to be embraced. It is something to be leaned into. Because within it lies everything you are searching for. Growth, opportunity, strength. These things do not exist in comfort. They exist on the other side of discomfort. They exist in the moments when you step forward despite not knowing what will happen next. They exist in the decision to act even when there are no guarantees. And that is difficult. That is terrifying. Because it means accepting risk. It means accepting failure. It means accepting that no matter how much effort you put in, no matter how much you prepare, things might not go the way you want them to. But what is the alternative? To do nothing? To let your life pass by while you sit on the sidelines, waiting for certainty that will never come? That is not living. That is merely existing. And people will say, but what if I fail? What if I make the wrong choice? What if things go terribly wrong? And yes, that is always a possibility. Failure is always a possibility. But so is success. So is growth. So is transformation. And if you never step forward, if you never take the risk, you will never know what was possible for you. And that is a far greater loss than any failure could ever be. Because at least failure teaches you something. At least failure makes you stronger. At least failure moves you forward. But inaction does nothing but steal time. And time is the one thing you will never get back. So what do? How do you move forward when everything is uncertain? You act. You take responsibility. You focus on what you can control. You accept that no matter how much you prepare, there will always be unknown. And instead of fearing them, you meet them head on. You become the kind of person who is not broken by uncertainty, but who thrives within it, who sees it not as something to be avoided, but as something to be conquered. And that is possible, but it requires a shift in mindset. It requires you to stop waiting for the perfect moment. It requires you to stop believing that you need all the answers before you begin. It requires you to accept that discomfort is not a sign that you are on the wrong path, but a necessary part of the process. Because growth does not happen in comfort. Strength is not built in ease. The life you want, the person you want to become, is on the other side of uncertainty. And the only way to get there is to step forward even when you are afraid. Because here is the truth. You will never be fully ready. You will never have all the information. You will never eliminate every risk. But if you wait for those things, you will wait forever. And one day you will look back and realize that the only thing standing between you and the life you could have had was your own hesitation. And that realization will break you, because by then it will be too late. So do not wait. Do not let fear of the unknown keep you trapped in a life that is smaller than what you are capable of living. Step forward, take the risk, embrace the uncertainty, because on the other side of it is everything you have been searching for.